importance of having enough children to sustain our numbers and not plummet into population collapse.
Elon Musk calls it civilization's biggest threat, and policy experts call it Europe's demographic trap. Why and how serious is it? Eurostat projects Europe's population will drop 6% to 419 million by 2100. But that decline could be worse. No migration scenarios, which are becoming increasingly likely with more conservative politics, would result in a population collapse, a decline of more than 30% to 295 million by 2100. A lot of Europeans today would argue that less people would be a good thing, but it's not. Because not only is Europe's population collapsing, it's also aging. By 2050, 30% of the European population will be over 65. This means 2 working age adults for every elderly person. The people requiring the most expensive care, those over 80, will more than double from 6 to 11% of the population. From 2008 to 2021, pension expenditure per beneficiary rose across the EU by 18%. This all means that by 2050, every worker will need to support half a pensioner, themselves, and all of the government services everyone needs. When the worker-to-retiree ratio collapses, government budgets get squeezed from both sides. Fewer workers means less payroll tax revenue while costs increase. Age-related government spending, pensions, healthcare, long-term care already consumes a quarter of EU GDP. Tax burdens have been climbing across France, Italy, Germany, and Spain in recent decades as governments struggle to fund aging populations and increasing bureaucracy with shrinking workforces. This fiscal pressure shows up in the debt numbers. France is at 113% despite having some of the best family policies in Europe. Italy is at 135%, and Romania's debt to GDP ratio jumped 5.9 percentage points in just 1 year. Poland, 5.7 points. These are the same countries losing 20% or more of their working age population by 2050. So Europe found a solution: mass immigration.
The previous government were running an open borders experiment. As the ONS sets out, nearly 1 million people came to Britain in the year ending June 2023.
In 2022 alone, 5 million people immigrated from outside the EU, 1.4% of the entire EU population in a single year.
The European Union's open border policy has resulted in a massive influx of migrants in the last few years, surging to more than 1 million at its peak.
In Germany, foreign nationals make up 15% of the workforce, up from 8.5% in 2000. Immigration has helped Germany's recent economic expansion, and many EU health systems heavily depend on immigrant doctors and nurses. But as an expert puts it, for immigration to help, immigrants have to actually be in work. Many European countries have low employment rates among immigrants. When you add an immigrant who needs welfare support, that makes things worse. Most politicians on the center-left and center-right recognize that immigration is needed to ease demographic pressure, so they focus on tougher asylum rules, hoping stricter border enforcement will provide political cover for higher regular immigration. Looking at the numbers, there are 3 ways forward. Option 1, make immigration work better. This requires sustaining strong immigration flows while implementing integration policies that maximize fiscal contribution. However, growing public resistance to immigration, often fueled by justifiable concerns about service capacity and cultural change, makes it increasingly difficult to maintain the political and cultural consensus for this. Fix fertility rates. France and Sweden show it's possible. Comprehensive childcare, extended parental leave, financial support for families. I'm living in Switzerland, for example, where the cost of childcare is roughly half of the average wage, the highest in the OECD. The problem is that these changes will bear fruit in 20 years, while the fiscal crisis is unfolding in the next 10. Productivity and economic growth. Morgan Stanley recommends France and Spain raise retirement ages to keep more people working, but the bigger opportunity is growing the economy. Deregulating to free up business creation, cutting red tape that's stifling entrepreneurs, and reducing energy costs that are burdening companies. Higher GDP means larger government revenues from the same tax rates. The math works if you can make the economy grow fast enough to offset the demographic decline. And without one of these solutions, the spiral accelerates. Birth rates stay low because the high debts forces austerity, making children even more expensive. Eventually, central banks print money to prevent fiscal collapse, but inflation makes families even less affordable. Political unrest grows as pension payments don't match inflation and purchasing power crashes. So calling this Western civilization's biggest threat isn't an understatement. Demographic collapse destabilizes the political stability, wealth, and the quality of life we've built over the past century.